So let's start. Welcome to the lecture on Catalytic Organometallics, part 17. Today we will learn something about rhodium catalysis, and we will start with a so-called oxosynthesis. This is the elder name for the hydroformylation, a very important industrial process, as you will see soon. It was invented by Otto Röhlen in 1938. Well, invented in a town, Oberhausen. Just about 30 kilometers away from here, as you might know, and initially by cobalt catalysis, and still a lot of hydroformylation reactions are done with cobalt catalysis, but then rhodium catalysts occur, and especially in the field of enantioselective hydroformylation, then the rhodium catalysts are somewhat preferred. Well, so the reaction, the most simple reaction we talk about, is the hydroformylation of the most simple olefin, ethene. It's treated with hydrogen and carbon monoxide. So then we need the catalyst, and this will result in a hydroformylation reaction, since as a net result, formaldehyde is added to the double bond. Hydroformylation means one hydrogen and one formyl group are added to the olefin. Well, resulting in, of course, propionic aldehyde, which then might be oxidized to the propionic acid, propane carboxylic acid, or reduced to N-propanol. If we have an additional substituent at the olefin, then the result is a bit more interesting in terms of the structures. So, because in that case we have the possibility to synthesize different regioisomers. The branch one and the linear product. So we have a problem of regioselectivity, and of course chemists try to achieve high regioselectivity for one or for the other regioisomer. Well, by optimizing reaction conditions and especially the ligands which are applied. So, since we have a stereogenic center alpha, in that case with a branched aldehyde, then we have, of course, also the problem of stereo selectivity, and recent research, of course, addressed the optimization of enantioselective induction by chiral ligands. We will see examples for that. So overall, in industrial synthesis, about 1 million tons of hydro formulation products are synthesized by the oxosynthesis a year. Let's have a look for the general mechanism. Very often, rhodium, phosphine complexes are applied as catalysts. So, one example, 3 phosphine ligands, 1 hydrogen and 1 carbon monoxide as additional ligands. So, for instance, L is triphenyl phosphine. In equilibrium, one phosphine ligand, well, is exchanged by an olefin, the olefinic substrate, and next step will be a hydrometallation of the olefin we have a square planar rhodium complex as intermediate, and this is the example for going to the linear, to the production of a linear aldehyde. So with the opposite regioselectivity, hydrogen to that position, rhodium to that, we would end up with a branched aldehyde, of course. So, next step, carbon monoxide is added. Forming a square pyramidal complex as intermediate. The insertion reaction then will produce again a square planar intermediate. Of course, then the hydrogen comes into play. Well, just an addition of hydrogen and in the next step, a reductive elimination takes place, producing the hopefully desired product, unless you want the branched one, of course. And this one. Okay, which then is the active catalytic species? Again, adding the olefinic substrate and closing the catalytic cycle. As you have noticed, there are always those equilibrium arrows. Bit strange. Could it go into the opposite direction? Yes. These types of reactions are known and strangely enough found preparative applications. So the hydro formulation is reversible. One nice example from a Canadian research group in natural product synthesis, group from Deslongchamps. They treated this compound, which has an alpha-beta unsaturated ketone, an aldehyde functionality, also alpha-beta unsaturated, then a tertiary alcohol here with this catalyst, a rhodium triphenyl phosphine chloride. By the way, this is better known as Wilkinson's catalyst. For instance, an early catalyst for hydrogenation reactions. Dichloromethane, 16 hours reflux, so this is not very hot, 35 degrees, if I remember it correctly. And what was obtained was this product in an 83% yield, and indeed missing the aldehyde functionality. Instead, a hydrogen is sitting there. So, what is this reaction good for? Since normally you want to go to higher complexity during your synthesis, and this is obviously the opposite. So, the background of that is that you can imagine with a few steps you can transfer this alpha beta unsaturated ketone to this product, since well, hydrogenation here and well, CC bond formation at this position here, yeah, and introducing the unsaturation here. And this is, as you might notice, easily accessible also in a few steps from dihydrocarbone Markovnikov addition of water to that isopropanol group, and here this is just a Robinson annihilation reaction. That's it. So, and the Dillon-Champs group envisioned that we can start from here, go all the way to that one, and now it's only a few steps to get to the target molecule, well, a sesquiterpenoid called oxydentalol. So this is essentially the whole synthesis, a complete synthesis. So, let's have a look at an example of, again, hydroformylation, and in this case, enantioselective hydroformylation. Well, very often, nowadays, diazophospholane ligands are applied. I will draw one. So, yet this is not chiral at all. We have to introduce some functionalized aryl groups. So, that's it. You can imagine it took a long time, and a lot of research groups have worked on that until we found this as one type of optimized ligand. So, what is R? A very nice example is this one. With this R group 4 times involved in that ligand, a very small substrate, vinyl acetate, is hydroformulated. Enantioselectively. So, you need 0.01% catalyst, 0.02% ligand. Hopefully you can recover the catalyst. So rhodium is very expensive, and that ligand, of course, also. So, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and as a result, quantitative conversion is achieved. A regio selectivity of 41 to 1, alpha to beta. So the alpha carbon, the formyl group in alpha position is of course the branch one, and the linear one is beta. So the chiral one is the major product. And finally, well, it was about better than 95% EE, what has been achieved here. Second example. The R group, a bit simpler. Oh well, don't need to draw that. So not a naphthalene moiety here, just a phenyl moiety as the R group. And let's go to the next blackboard here. So this was then applied for the hydroformylation of that vinyl substituted naphthalene system. Getting to this aldehyde, well, 0.2% a chiral rhodium catalyst. The selectivity, regioselectivity, is a bit worse than that, or clearly worse than that. It was just 6:1 and 83% enantiomeric excess. So why is this interesting? Because you could oxidize that to get to the corresponding carboxylic acid. And this is naproxen, an anti-inflammatory drug, which is rather important. Nice reaction. It's certainly not the complete breakthrough for the production of that, because for a drug, 83% enantiomeric excess is certainly not enough. Well, there are alternatives. For instance, the reduction of this acrylic acid, NAF2 functionalized, NAF2 substituted acrylic acid. So this is a hydrogenation reaction. We will discuss, presumably tomorrow, an enantioselective hydrogenation reaction of olefins in more detail, but in this case, just to complete this scheme, with S-binap as ligand at ruthenium acetate, and you need 0.5%, then hydrogen in methanol. Well, I hope you still know what binap is. Somewhere during your studies you should heard about that. This is an atrope chiral system with a chiral axis here. So, and rhodium as well as ruthenium binap complexes are known for enantioselective hydrogenation reaction, and 92% yield to naproxen is reported with 97% enantiomeric excess, which is quite good, of course. So we talked about the hydroformylation. Once again, hydroformylation. Well, if we have we do that with hydrogen and carbon monoxide, in principle we could use formaldehyde. But what about having another aldehyde, just an aldehyde? This type of reaction then would produce a ketone. So, what has been done? A hydrogen and an acyl group has been added to the double bond. So, this is then called a hydroacylation. Some examples for this type of reaction. Salicylic aldehyde reacts the presence of a rhodium catalyst with this hexadiene, producing the ketones, corresponding ketones, both regioisomers, the branched one and the linear. Quantitative yield ratio 4:1 in favor of the branched product. Very interesting is this type of intramolecular hydroacylation as a 5, wow, could call that a 5-endotric process in principle as net result. But, well, you have, as the intermediate, the rhodium sitting at that position. So it is a rhodium catalyzed process which can be done enantioselectively, a rhodium binary, producing chiral cyclopentanones with better 90% EE. Two more examples for the hydroacylation. Those were not performed enantioselectively, but are nevertheless highly interesting because medium-sized rings are produced. So, with this example, oxidative addition reaction of the rhodium catalyst to that CH bond and then reacting with that olefin and having the cyclopropane moiety here, which can easily, well, open up just reducing the ring strain then. And well, let's count. Let's count the positions, carbon positions we have, carbon atoms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if we break one bond here, we would get an 8 and form a ring, we would get an 8-membered carbocycle. And indeed, this is the result of that reaction. This one is produced with a 65% yield. So you might ask, what are the other 35%? These are other regioisomers, smaller rings with again an exocyclic chain remaining. So, but nevertheless, the 8-membered ring is the main product. Also 7-membered rings are to be synthesized similarly. This is the less spectacular example. So, also rhodium catalyst. (62% yield of this structure). So let's change to another subject. The reaction of rhodium catalysts for diazo compounds as substrates producing intermediary rhodium carbene complexes, which undergo then various highly interesting reactions. The standard achiral rhodium catalyst is dirhodium tetraacetate. So you can imagine the structure. We have a rhodium-rhodium bond. We have those acetate bridges and these 4 times. The chiral, well, there are quite a lot of chiral rhodium complexes, somewhat similar. One of the most important is this one. A sulfone amide group. The aryl group here is a special one. We have a paraphenylene with a long chain, a dodecanyl chain, while causing a good solubility of that chiral complex. So this is the so-called DOSP ligand for dodecyl, Phenyl, Sulfonyl, Prolinato. Well, proline as amino acid. Proline moiety you might figure out here, you should figure out here. So, and DOSP, DO here, VS is here, and there is the P. So, what can you do with this type of rhodium complexes? Well, cyclopropanation reactions. Carbenes react with olefins in cyclopropanation reaction, and also metal carbene complexes can do so. For instance, isobutene elemental nitrogen is eliminated, and you get well, the cyclopropanation reaction. You can do that with this type of chiral rhodium complex. Well, actually, this is the case where copper catalysis works best. Therefore, I should add here the example of a copper catalyst. 91% yield and better 99% enantiomeric excess. Tertiary butyl groups here, and a copper triflate coordinated to this bisoxazolene ligand. Yeah. Well, that type of rhodium complex was tested for an intramolecular cyclopropanation. Quite a lot of examples. Just 1 mole% of a chiral rhodium complex, dichloromethane, room temperature. So, here the rhodium carbene complex is formed. The carbene reacts with that olefin under cyclopropanation. Better 94% EE were achieved. One achiral case, but nevertheless rather interesting because of structure, the structures of the starting material and the product. just the Rhodium tetraacetate, chloroform, 60 degrees, 30 minutes reaction time. Please, as an exercise, try to figure out what's the structure of a product. For solving this problem, just imagine that you produce a carbene here, reacts in a cyclopropanation with that olefinic bond, which is part of a cyclopropene. Therefore, you get two anylated cyclopropane rings. Connected with just this carbonyl bridging those two positions. Of course, rather strained molecule. Nevertheless, (37% yield is rather satisfying for this result. Well, some more structurally interesting examples. Reaction with butadiene. Just Rhodium tetraacetate. Cyclopropane formation at one olefinic moiety of a butadiene. Gives this product which can be isolated. So, imagine you would have a CC double bond here at this position. Then you would have a cope system, a system where you can let that undergo a cope rearrangement. Cyclopropanes can take part in such a reaction. This CC bond just reacts as if it would be a case with a double bond. Yeah? So, it breaks. You have a double bond here, a double bond there, forming CC bond there. Well, 6 centers involved in the electrocyclic process. Nevertheless, at the end, because of that CH2 group here and breaking that cyclopropane ring, you have then produced a 7-membered ring. Similar reactions are known producing 7-membered rings by Diels-Alder type reaction of vinyl cyclopropanes, for instance. So, you need elevated temperature, 220 degrees, a bit more than usual for cope rearrangements. Well, and this reaction is possible with additional substituents at the butadiene, and well, okay. And 41 to 94% yield is reported depending on the R group and its position. Now a strange example. Which a bit highlights the mechanism which should be discussed in such a case. So again, rhodium, dirhodium acetate. So, and we abbreviate that as the catalytic metal complex. So, N2 is produced, elemental nitrogen, so an addition reaction of this carbene complex to the acetylene is discussed later on, I think next week, when we will discuss ruthenium catalyzed metathesis reactions. We will notice similar mode of reaction. So 2+2 cycloaddition process will lead to this metallocyclobutene intermediate, highly strained, ring opening reaction, will lead to this carbene complex. Now that carbene complex will interact with that olefinic moiety. Actually, you can again interpret that as a 2+2 cycloaddition reaction or an electrocyclization. Well, just as you wish. And now, reductive elimination and CC bond formation is giving rise to the final product. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's right. So, unbelievable, but 95% yield are reported. Another special example I somehow found rather funny. Again, dirhodium tetraacetate. A rhodium carbene complex is formed. Now we don't have an olefinic moiety present for the reaction. In close proximity is that carbonyl group of the lactone. So interaction with the free electron pairs of the carbonyl group. So, what happens? Carbene moiety interacting with the nucleophilic carbonyl group so forming a permanent dipolar intermediate, reactive intermediate. So now mesomeric structures, and you notice that you have a 1,3 dipole. So if you, this doesn't survive very long, yeah? If you perform that reaction in the presence of a dipolarophile, can be a rather simple olefin, can undergo that type of process. And this type of final product is produced. Well, some more examples of interesting reactions with those diazo compounds. As you know, carbenes can, especially intramolecularly, make insertion reaction into CH bonds. So do those carbene rhodium complexes. So, a chiral rhodium complex actually similar to that DOSP complex produces the carbene here, insertion into that CH bond, and a non-selective insertion excellent reactions, better than 98% yield and 93% enantiomeric excess. Another example, obviously we started the synthesis from proline. So in this case you of course don't need the chiral rhodium, since you already have the chiral information in here. So 86% yield with 96% EE. Well, actually, I'm not sure. Maybe they did apply a chiral rhodium complex, in that case producing a exceptionally high diastereomeric excess. Okay, 96% DE. So, and if you treat that product with lithium aluminum hydride, I hope you know that in that case the amide carbonyl group is completely reduced. You get to the tertiary amine. And this is a naturally occurring alkaloid. Well, interestingly, these CH insertion reactions also occur intermolecularly, here with cyclohexane as substrate and solvent. This DOSP rhodium complex applied. As catalyst. %, yield with 95% EE. So if this type of reaction is possible intermolecularly, then this opens up a lot of interesting possibilities for natural product synthesis. chiral rhodium catalyst, a conjugated carbene complex. Rhodium carbene complex is formed here at this position, and an intermolecular CH insertion occurs in benzylic position. A marvelous way of putting the parts of that molecule together and generating their chiral center. Well, with 91% EE, well, one wonders that this is selectively possible, or the selectivity is high in terms of the enantiomeric excess, but it's low overall. But nevertheless, 43% yield for such a reaction, I think is rather astonishing. Two final examples, very similar. Very similar substrate. You see, it's the same, except those oxygen substituents. Well, let's call that reagent A. 0.1% of a chiral rhodium catalyst of the type we've discussed before, 23 degrees. Well, and what happens now is rather remarkable. Well, I would have anticipated that a cyclopropionation reaction would occur. No, this is not the case. Preferred is a CH insertion in allylic position. This one. And this time, indeed, with 95% yield, better 98% diastereomeric excess, since we have two adjacent chiral centers, and this diastereoisomer then produced with 98% EE. Slightly different substrate with an additional methoxy group there. Same catalyst, same reagent A, but that reagent then in 3 times excess. So then, after the first CH insertion, we would anticipate now it should react with this olefin or that olefin. but what reported is then the CH insertion in benzoic position. And the product which has been isolated is this one. %92% yield and 99% enantiomeric excess. So I think we should finish this lesson with this marvelous wonder type reaction. We will go on tomorrow, as I already announced, with enantioselective hydrogenation of olefins, and we will discuss a related enantioselective reaction in connection with the so-called Takasago process. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.